want more choices. And I think the underlying bill here tonight does exactly the opposite. It raises the cost of health insurance and creates this new mega bureaucracy to make health care decisions that should be left to doctors and their patients.
Party and political philosophy have, as far back as Teddy Roosevelt, have called for health care for the American people. For generations, the American people have called for affordable, quality health care for their families. Today, the call will be answered. Today, we will pass the Affordable Health Care for America Act. This quality day, we will pass the Affordable Health Care for America Act. This quality lowers cost, expands coverage to 36 million more people, and retains choices. In affordability for the middle class, security for our seniors, and honors our responsibility to our children, not adding not one dime to the deficit. Today, with the passage of Affordable Health Care for America Act, we will make history. We will also make progress for America's working families. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation. Thank you.
The gentleman.
The yeas are 220, the nays are 215. The bill is passed.
President Obama.
Mr. President, as we move toward tonight's all-important vote, we'll have 10 more hours of discussion of this 2,074-page bill, which represents the top part of this stack. The other 2,000-page bill is the House-passed bill. Senators will have an opportunity to express themselves on the merits of this proposal. What do we know, Mr. President, for sure as we move toward this debate? We know that Americans oppose this bill. Senators who support this bill, Madam President, have a lot of explaining to do. A lot of explaining to do.
Leader.
My friend, the distinguished Republican leader, he is living in a different world than most everyone else. Last year, 750,000 Americans filed bankruptcy. 750,000 Americans filed bankruptcy. Over half of those bankruptcies were because of medical expenses.
Talking about health insurance reform for more than 70 years before I was born. The Senate should not now prevent a real debate on health reform by hiding behind the fig leaf of a procedural filibuster.
Here, much to do to make sure we honor the legacy of our parents and our grandparents. We honor the legacy of the greatest generation in this generation, the baby boom generation, to ensure that we leave behind us not diminished opportunity, but more opportunity for our kids and our grandkids. There's much we need to do to make sure we have a health care system that works not just for a few people, but for everyone.
The nation spends too much on health care for what it gets. Because the problem in American health care will not cure itself, I rise in support of this motion to proceed and beginning the debate about how to fix American health care.
For New Mexicans, the status quo isn't an option. That's because without this health care reform, our state is expected to experience the largest increase in insurance premiums of any state in the Union. In 2016, without this reform, a family of 4 in New Mexico can expect to pay an astounding $28,000 a year in health care premiums.
Bill is fully phased in. When all these new programs, these massive expansion of entitlements are created, these brand new entitlements, when all this new spending occurs, this bill will cost $2.5 trillion over that 10-year period. $2.5 trillion. That's the real cost of this bill. That's how big this government is going to grow in a 10-year window.
Who will the government play? But then the question is, who will make health care decisions? Well, we're seeing evidence that they have government committees that say when you can get a mammogram, when you should get Pap screening. Will Americans and members of Congress have time to evaluate what's in the legislation? Well, we hope today and yesterday that we will bring out for the American people the cost of this. Because
in fact, a number of my colleagues down the other have come down here on the other side and said, of all the bankruptcies that occur in this country every single year, most of them occur because of the high cost of health care. Well, get this, America. Under their proposal, you're going to go bankrupt sooner because they drive the cost of health care up. They don't do anything to bend the cost curve down. I want to show you a chart, Madam President, which points out what happens to the cost curve under the Democrat plan that we are talking about here in the United States Senate. Blue represents the current cost curve. That is the increase in health care costs in this country that we would see if nothing was done. Just year-over-year increases as it goes out into the future. Now, what you would expect if you were going to reform health care is you would want to see that line start to bend down a little bit so that health care costs, health care increases go down over time instead of going up. But what happens? Under this proposal, and this is the Congressional Budget Office. This isn't what I'm saying or any of my Republican colleagues here on the floor are saying, Madam President. This is what the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says. This would actually, under the Democrat plan that we're talking about here today, increase the cost of health care.
Thank you, Madam President. As I rise today to speak in support of the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act, the Congressional Budget Office has determined that this bill will provide coverage for more than 94% of Americans, 98% when accounting for the elderly population, while reducing the spiraling cost of health care and trimming the deficit over the next 10 years and beyond. In 1994, family premiums have risen to over 150%. In 1993, the average annual premium for employer-sponsored family coverage was $5,000. This year, the same cost for coverage is over $13,000 per year. By 2016, family health insurance is expected to reach over $24,000. That, in my state of New York, is simply unaffordable. Today,
colleagues on the other side of the aisle who talk a lot about this legislation understand that if we do nothing, we are going to leave the American people and our budgets in serious danger by not controlling health care costs. Doing nothing, if the U.S. government does nothing, health care spending will double in the next decade. That is, we spend about $810 billion on health care. That's 1/3 of our total federal budget. And if we do nothing, federal spending is going to go to $1.56 trillion. That is because we are not controlling health care costs.
My vote today to move forward on this important debate should in no way be construed by the supporters of this current framework as an indication of how I might vote as this debate comes to an end.
You can see the Stupak Compromise Amendment, which was supported by 64 House Democrats and a huge majority of Republicans. No funds authorized or appropriated by this act may be used to pay for abortion or to cover any part of the costs of any health plan that includes coverage of abortion. That's all it says. It should be abundantly clear to each member of this body that the House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed pro-life language exactly 2 weeks ago, markedly different from that contained in the Reid proposal. The House provisions, in contrast to the terribly flawed provisions in the Reid bill, contain language that would not only safeguard the rights of the unborn, but also would prevent medical providers from being coerced into performing procedures that violate their conscience.
President Obama has weighed in on some of these issues. President Obama's speech in a joint session of Congress, we all remember that's September 9th of this year, and he said this, quote, "In one more misunderstanding I want to clear up. Under our plan, no federal dollars will be used to fund abortions, and federal conscience laws will remain in place." Well, the president has gone on to state on multiple occasions that he would not support abortion in a health care bill.
Make no mistake, this bill will change. There will be amendments to it that will make it an even better bill. And there may be amendments that make it less to my liking and therefore a less good bill, to my point of view. But the final bill will make health care available to tens of millions of more Americans. It will make health insurance more secure for all Americans who have it, and will put an end to the unsustainable trajectory that we're now on with the cost of health care. Is that while millions of Americans struggle to pay for health care, insurance executives continue to make obscene salaries. From 2000 to 2007, period of 8 years, Americans saw their premiums almost double. During that same time, we saw more than 6 million more Americans become uninsured, and during that same time, insurance company profits rose 428%. 428%. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know to understand why we have to pass this bill.
For months now, groups from outside my state have assigned various motives to my deliberations on health care and tried to define the meaning of my vote. According to the last tally, there's been more than $3.3 million worth of media ads that have been purchased in my home state of Arkansas by groups from outside of our state, certainly none by me, and most with my name in the ad. Still, Madam President, I have continued to approach this issue like I always do. These outside groups seem to think that this is all about my reelection. I simply don't think they know me very well. I am focused on my opportunity to influence the final version of health care reform legislation in a way that most helps my state.
About how moving 15 million low-income Americans into a program called Medicaid, which is a medical ghetto, is not health care reform. And we've also heard senator after senator say, what right do we, what kind of arrogance do we have to say to states who are in their worst fiscal condition since the Depression, we're going to expand health care and you're going to pay for it. Senator Corker, you...
Such urgency to deal with the status quo that we must pass this bill and we must pass it virtually without amendment. I would like to point out, as I have done before, if there is such urgency with respect to the challenges we have in health care, why do we wait until 2014 to have those changes come? We've heard all of these examples coming on the Democratic side of the aisle of people who have terrible problems under the health care plan. We must act. We must act immediately, and the act will be to say to all of these people, we'll solve your problem in 2014.
have malpractice reform. That's nowhere in this monstrosity. Why don't we encourage health savings accounts and expand them? Why don't we let people go across state lines to get health insurance policies of their choice? Why don't we reward wellness and fitness? Why don't we have, there's a long list of fixes to the long-term costs of health care that we could control, that we could act tomorrow on a bipartisan basis.
Is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to H.R. 3590 shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander.
No.
Mr. Barrasso.
No.
Senators voting in the affirmative. Warner, Webb.
Senate will come to order. Senate will come to order. Are there any senators who wish to vote or to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 60, the nays are 39, 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn having voted in the affirmative, the motion is agreed to. Expressions of approval are not allowed. Senate.
Recognized for 1 minute.
Mr.
From
Speaker,
Michigan.
I spent 6 years in the Catholic seminary studying to be a priest, and I've always been pro-life. I will be 81 years old this September. Certainly at this stage of my life, I am not going to change my mind and support abortion. I am not going to jeopardize my eternal salvation. I sought counsel from my priest, advice from my family, friends, and constituents, and I have read the Senate abortion prohibition more than a dozen times. I am convinced that the original prohibition of the Hyde Amendment is in the Senate bill. No federal funds can be used for abortion, except in the case of rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother. I am a pro-life member, both for the born and the unborn. Yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back the balance of his time. The gentlelady from New York reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from California is the gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I yield 1 1/2 minutes to Mr. Smith to consume in order, and I would ask that the House be in order before he begins.
The House will be in order. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute and a half.
For those of us who recognize abortion as violence against children and the exploitation of women, nothing less than a comprehensive prohibition of public funding of elective abortion satisfies the demands of social justice. Regrettably, the language that emerged from the Senate is weak, duplicitous, and ineffective, not by accident, but by design. It will open up the floodgates of public funding for abortion in a myriad of programs, resulting in more dead babies and more wounded mothers. Abortion isn't health care, Mr. Speaker. It's not preventative health care. We live in an age of ultrasound imaging, the ultimate window to the womb and its occupant. Let's protect the unborn child and their mother. This, unfortunately, is the biggest increase in abortion funding ever.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from California.
Tonight on World News, it is now the law. The president signs health care reform. Opponents counterattack. And we ask doctors, will this change how they treat you?
World News with Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. As of today, it is the law of the land that every man, woman, and child in America will have health care coverage. And at the White House, the president signed the bill and marked this day in history, while Republican opponents marshaled forces hoping to undo the law. We will stake out all sides tonight, including your doctor's office, to ask how doctors think this will change your life. But up first, Jake Tapper at the White House, where the president said today this nation will not scale back its aspirations. Jake?
That's right, Diane. Before the raucous celebration, the president said today that the bill signing was both remarkable and improbable, and it was that, given the bill's setback after setback, and President Obama today was as happy as we've seen him perhaps since the inauguration.
Thank you. It was part campaign rally.
Thank you. Everybody, please have a seat.
Part State of the Union.
Today, after all the votes have been tallied, health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America. I'm signing this reform bill into law on behalf of my mother, who argued with insurance companies even as she battled cancer in her final days.
The president also said he was signing the bill for the millions of Americans who have no health insurance, including the mother of 11-year-old Marcellus Owens. She lost her job, her insurance, and then she lost her life. And he recognized Vicki Kennedy, widow of the late Senator Ted Kennedy, a champion of universal health care.
I remember seeing Ted walk through that door in a summit in this room a year ago. He was confident that we would do the right thing.
And then, after more than a year of bitter debate, the president finally signed the bill.
I've got to use every pen, so it's going to take a really long time.
Using 22 pens, giving away 19 to allies, 2 to the archives, and 1 for himself. And at a later celebration...
Yes, he did.
Let us always remember the lesson of this day and the lesson of history. We don't fear the future. We shape the future.